My agenda for today, or our agenda for today, I'm going to start with a little history of SAP Analytics, just to kind of ground us all. I think most of us, if you're currently using SAP Analytics Cloud, or if you're a current SAP Analytics Cloud customer, you may be familiar, but I think it's worthwhile to start there. I'll give an overview of SAC and some of the more recent innovations. I'm not going to go into every feature and every function of SAC, but rather to highlight what I feel and Sharon and I feel are some of the most important features to make you aware of. I will spend a little extra time on SAC planning, SAC planning extended with AI and ML, how SAC fits into the SAP ecosystem, both now and for the future. Sharon then will share a little bit of their journey at Blue Diamond Grows with SAC and what the future holds for them, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. Hopefully we'll have 10 or so minutes to do some questions at the end, but if we run out of time, we can always have follow-ups with anyone who's interested to learn more. I have asked Will to field questions in the chat, and if you have one, feel free to post it there. Unless it's something like you can't hear me or something disruptive to the webinar, we'll probably keep the questions to the end and address them then. But otherwise, I'll get going. Okay, so I chose this picture as a kind of evolution, right? We see it often. I was actually excited to see, because when I've seen these pictures before, it's always a caveman, and in this case, they've sort of made it a bit more gender neutral, I think. But the important point here is that we've really moved from a crawl, walk, run state into a state over here where the future of analytics is really powerful. Lots of us, for those of us working in this field for 10 plus years, we've seen this evolution occur, and everybody's always talked about machine learning and AI and predictive and all these fancy things, and it was always sort of off of the horizon, but today it's really become more of a reality. So I'll start with Beck's Analyzer. I started my career with Beck's Analyzer, as SAP launched into this space, giving a tool to users that allowed for self-service analytics, slice and dice, was important, and Beck's Analyzer was useful for that. I still see enterprises running Beck's Analyzer today. Obviously, many of them have migrated to Analysis for Office, but some not. It's a powerful tool, and I think the seed of what it offers is still relevant to many organizations. Business Objects was added to the mix as part of SAP's acquisitions. For many people, this was a rather rocky introduction. Business Objects, especially 4.0, had some difficulties for many clients and companies I worked with. I know Sharon has shared with me some struggles that they had. In some ways, it served a lot of powerful needs, and today with 4.3, it serves those needs very well. But the roadmap for many customers was not as smooth as it could have been. With Design Studio, you really saw a step change for SAP in the ability to offer more of a modern user interface and a modern experience for users. And then that, as many of you are aware, morphed into Lumira Designer, which again is deployed today and was really the beginnings of this idea of a self-service dashboarding and analytics platform. The seed of SAC was really with Design Studio Lumira. SAP Analytics Cloud, I had to look it up because I was trying to think, how old is it now? But in fact, SAC launched in 2015 and is now 6 years old. For many companies, the adoption has been slower while they've waited to see if the maturity of the product is there. And I think really what I'm trying to share today is that it is, and that there's a lot of great opportunities for enterprises, small, medium, large, to get some great value from SAC. So let's talk a little bit about what SAC is. Many people see a list of features or a architecture diagram that shows SAC as the center of an intelligent enterprise. Rather than show that same SAP slide, I thought it'd be better to kind of highlight what I feel like are some of the important features that SAC has, which other tools in this class might not. I'm going to use this analogy of a Swiss Army knife here on the right, because really SAC is many things. It can be different things to different people. as a child, I had a Swiss Army knife that I carried around with me all the time. And there was probably 2 or 3 things I used all the time, right? Maybe I used the tweezers and the knife or something. But there's other people that might use different tools for different purposes. And really, that's the goal, I would say, of SAC. It's to not be everything to everyone, but to be many things to many people. And some of the highlights of what those things are that I'm going to talk about today are obviously the dashboarding, which is really the core functionality of SAC, the self-service analytics, which, if I go back to my comments about Beck's Analyzer, are really one of the things that, great, a dashboard is cool, I can use it, but the self-service is really what I need in order to see some real value. In conjunction with that, you've got this idea of reporting, right? Despite the fact that many of us would love for the business to be consuming all of their data through dashboards and self-service analytics, there is still a need for printable PDF reports or consumed broadcast reports. And SAC's recent innovations, especially in this area, have really closed that gap with Web Intelligence or Crystal Reports or other products out there. There's a series of other things here: applications, broadcasting, which I just mentioned, predictive analytics, planning, collaboration, mobile, Excel integration, all are important. I'm going to highlight predictive and planning a little bit more, as I said before. And then finally, this data wrangling piece, which, although I'm not going to touch on it, it's an important concept. And as I talk about SAC in the larger SAP ecosystem, I think I'll touch on a few points that'll be relevant and important for a lot of you to know. Okay, so back to our Swiss Army knife. So here's an example dashboard that we at NIMBL here built for the San Francisco 49ers. This is used in what we call their executive huddle, which is a room that allows them to see real-time data from their game day operations. So for me, although the dashboard is the cool and the fun and the thing that often sells analytics to executives and to business people, the tool that it really represents is the bottle opener for me. It's the thing that is very useful when you need it. I want to open a beer and I'm super excited to open it when I can, or I want to open a bottle of wine and I need the corkscrew, right? But it's not necessarily the go-to tool of every user every day, right? Most people would probably use their knife more than they use the can opener and the bottle opener. But the can opener and the bottle opener are the one sometimes that is the one you need at the moment you need it. Again, this is the seed of SAC, and it's really what drove it from its infancy, and it's really the core of what it does from the start. Self-service analytics, I think of like whittling, right? Many people want to do many different things. It's hard to define what people want to do, but they just want to do it for themselves. And giving them a knife, or maybe multiple knives, to do what they need to be able to do themselves without predefining what it's going to look like is important, right? So when you look at SAC's current capabilities, I've got a little animation in here that's really illustrating a tool called Data Analyzer. For those of you that aren't aware, this is very much like a pivot table. It's like a Beck's Analyzer or Analysis for Office experience. You can see here dragging and dropping fields from a list of available dimensions or measures and turning those on and off for the user. Most of our clients, I would say, use Excel for this type of thing today. And SAC a year ago, 2 years ago, was incapable of doing this sort of thing, except in very rare scenarios, for example, with BW data. Today, this data analyzer tool could be used with direct HANA data warehouses, which it sounds like a lot of you are running, and really gives the business the power, not just to see the dashboard and to kind of open their beer or the bottle of their wine, but to whittle away and do what they need to do with the data. What you don't want to do, clearly, is get a requirement for a dashboard. You build it, everyone says, that's great. How do I export all the data from that? Or how do I get 100,000 rows of data in my dashboard? Because I'm looking for this one piece of information. Data Analyzer and tools like it that are come in the suite with SAC are really the way to give that self-service analytics to people and allow them, with my analogy again, to whittle away at the data. The other piece is Explorer and story building, right? So Explorer was a standalone tool as part of the Business Objects Suite many years ago now. And it was really the beginning of this sort of Google-like experience to data that SAP was touting, that a user doesn't need to necessarily know what they're looking for when they start, but rather they can start with a data set explore the data, find the interesting insight, and then visualize it. You can see here, starting with the data set, right? Pulling it into Explorer, choosing a couple measures, sales volume and price, choosing a dimension that I want to slice it by, business area, selecting them, changing the chart type to a combination bar line, saying, I like this, I want to start a story, copying it to a story, saying, hey, I want to change the colors a little bit to match my own business color scheme, change some colors. And from this point forward, you could share this dashboard with users that you want, right? So that idea that you're not necessarily giving people a dashboard that's been pre-built, although you could, but rather giving people access to the data and saying, do what you need to do, but do it with a new paradigm of self-service dashboarding and analytics, rather than the paradigm of dump the data, pivot it in Excel, which I'm sure we've all lived and breathed for many years. Okay, the next concept I want to touch on, reporting and Excel integration. So on the left here is an example of a PDF report generated out of SAC. So again, some users may want that, need that. They have a report they have to deliver to a third party or to their management. And with SAP Analytics Cloud connected to the same data set, those users can simply export their report as a PDF. On the right side, you see an Excel-based report. Again, we're not trying to say, nor should anybody be saying, that Excel is a no-no or taboo. Many users need it. It's the way they live and breathe their life. The important thing here is that Excel can connect to the same SAC-based data set. So if it's HANA, if it's BW, if it's S4, if it's any other system that SAC can connect to, your Analysis for Office plugin and Excel functionality can consume that data, and effectively you could build a dynamic dashboard or report in Excel without people going off and building their own what I call fiefdoms of data or silos of data. So again, more about whittling. How can users take the same data and use it all within the ecosystem of SAP Analytics Cloud? Okay, let's touch a little bit on SAC planning. So one of the key components here of SAP Analytics Cloud is that it does not just reporting and analytics, but also planning, right? So, and people say, what do you mean by planning? Well, financial planning, sales planning, marketing planning, IT planning, HR planning, supply chain planning, all of these components of planning enabled in one place. So think of customers that were previously using BPC for planning or some other third-party tool, living in the same tool in a web-based interface where users can interact with the data and create those plans that can be then circled back to perform analytical scenarios. Many of you may have seen this picture before. You've got on the left a planning scenario, on the upper right an analytics scenario, and on the lower right a predictive scenario. That closed loop, right? You can plan, you can analyze, you can predict. You can plan, you can analyze, predict in one tool is certainly something that we've seen here at NIMBL as a rather killer application for SAC. I would argue that the second most popular tool in SFSR Management is the scissors, and the scissors really allow you to cut up the data yourself and to do things with it that you want. And that's really the power of planning. It shouldn't be, none of these things should be treated in isolation anymore. They don't need to be. Whereas in former lives of mine, you had, let's say, a trade promotion planning system, a demand planning system, a financial planning system, and a reporting and analytics system with BW. It was very difficult to bring all that data together into one place and provide a kind of seamless user experience for the user. The other very important thing here is that everything is collaborative in a cloud-based system like SAC, right? That users can comment and interact with the pieces of data throughout the cycle such that all the players, so to speak, all the links in the chain are able to work together for the common goal. So here's an example, just a little demo screen capture of SAC planning. You can see on the left that numbers are being adjusted. You can also see here that a predictive model is being generated off of this data. The cool thing is on the right, you're looking at a dashboard, you could argue, or at least a visualization of the data as you're planning it. And and on the left, you're looking at the data that's being inputted by users. right? I'm not sure, and maybe I should have asked, maybe at the end if we have enough time, we can cover how many of you are using planning functions today with SAP Analytics Cloud, and Sharon can certainly touch on Blue Diamond Growers' journey thus far with this component of SAC, right? SAC, just to be clear, is one product, but the planning component of it is licensed slightly separately, differently. It's just an add-on license to a given SAC tenant, but one system that does both. SAC planning extended with AI and ML. So what do we mean by that? What does AI and ML mean in this context? So for many organizations, an existing architecture exists for doing planning and prediction, right? In most cases, the current system has poor visualizations and is rather complex to use for the user, right? It's not a self-service necessarily platform that allows for ease of use. If you have a predictive analytics server, it's generally a separate thing. Again, it has poor visualizations. It has a high cost to integrate with necessary systems. So your architecture already is separated. And then third, most organizations would have an enterprise BI system. That takes a lot of effort to integrate the data, and it's difficult to do rapid prototyping, right? Together, this kind of architecture keeps everything separated and means that for many organizations, they say, hey, we want to do prediction. Okay, give a download of the data to a third-party company or a third-party system that will do that prediction and then feed it back into a planning or BI system. But having it all in one place really allows a lot more power. The data doesn't have to move around, and the architecture and the TCO of that architecture remains much more simplified. From a people perspective, right? You've got a planner on the left here. This person has, they don't have good aggregation context. They have lots of manual adjustments and version control that they have to do, right? They don't have a system in which they can see the iterations as the data is being provided to them. For a data scientist, again, it's somebody, either a rare skill that you've managed to hire or a third party that you may have reached out to ask for this capability, right? They're frustrated because they have to get data from multiple systems. That by the time they get it, it may be somewhat stale. And for them, then they have to send it back and translate that data into a format that the planner and or the BI analyst can consume. On the BI developer side, same thing. They don't see the big business context necessarily because they're living in their BI world. It takes a long time for requirements to be gathered, and there's a high likelihood that things get miscommunicated in the process, right? This is not something that you can say, hey, give me a file of last year's sales, and then I'll go off for a month and do my data science, and then I'll send it to the BI person. You could, but by the time that process completes, the ship has sailed and your business has somewhat moved on. It's important when you start looking at a closed loop ecosystem where you can do planning, BI, and predictive all in one place. With SAC, really you have that one person, one tool. So the tool does the data science, the tool does the data integration, the tool does the visualization, and the user consumer is both a user consumer of the data. So they're planning, they're predicting, and they're analyzing at the same time. This is quite different. It's obviously a new paradigm in this area for a lot of analytics tools. And I think given SAC's maturity with both analytics and with prediction, it really sets the stage well for this product to be a kind of a one-stop shop for these things. I call it the magnifying glass. You know, it's funny because I was trying to think what's the best tool on the Swiss Army knife to think about prediction, right? And everybody always thinks of a telescope or a magnifying glass. It's interesting to think that in some cases, people have a magnifying glass and they're not using it. And today, SAC has these tools and they're not using it. Many people aren't using it. So it is certainly the beginning of a journey for both SAC and for many customers in this predictive space, but it's a really exciting space to be moving into. What SAC is not, I think this is almost as important as what it is, right? I have a scar here. I don't know if anyone can see, probably not, from when I was probably 10 years old and I tried to cut down a tree with my Swiss Army knife and failed miserably and cut my finger pretty badly. You know, it's not necessarily a one-stop tool for everything people want to do. I think of trying to cut down a tree with a Swiss Army knife as trying to use a tool like SAC as a data extraction tool or a data dumping tool. When customers ask me, how can I build a dashboard that will display 100,000 rows of data? My first question is, why are you trying to do that? And what are you trying to do with SAC? Because you may not need to be cutting down the tree with your Swiss Army knife, or you may need a chainsaw. You may need a data integration tool, a data extraction tool that's really designed to do that, right? That's a tool for cutting down trees. We are not cutting down trees here. We're whittling and we're opening bottles of wine, to continue my analogy from earlier. The other thing it's not is this super Swiss Army knife with 800 tools on it, right? There are probably certain things that a given niche tool, maybe even a business objects tool, does better. If you think about formatted, very highly formatted reports that Crystal Reports does, right? That may be a tool on the Swiss Army knife that's not in SAC just yet, but it is certainly, you know, the tools are going to grow. But nobody should think necessarily that SAC is the end all be all for all their BI needs. One thing that we love to advocate at NIMBL is that if you're starting a journey for deployment of SAC, that you do user profiling exercise workshops where you really understand what are the business users trying to do. You know, if you look at the plethora of Swiss Army knives out there, some of them come with fish scaling tools, some of them come with pliers, some of them come with you know, files, nail clippers. If that's things that the business wants to be able to do, if there are certain reporting and analytical scenarios that they need, we got to make sure we have the right tool for the job and match that tool to the job. In many cases, it may be SAC. In some cases, maybe SAC augmented with something else. So SAC is not a data warehouse. This is also an important point. I find many customers believing that they can now live in a world where they have S4 and SAC and they don't need any data warehouse in which to combine their data. But for most customers, and it sounds like for many of you based on the poll questions, a data warehouse is in place, and more importantly, it's required. SAC can consume data from a data warehouse, but it in and of itself is not a data warehouse. And I'll touch on that with a bit more detail in a second. Oops. Okay, let's talk about SAC and the SAP ecosystem. I think this is an important thing for all of you to understand. It's also a shifting road, I guess, or a more defined road every day that I watch SAP and its journey with the SAP Analytics Cloud. So this is a very important slide, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on it. There are now different versions of SAC, one of which I will start with on the left here, known as the embedded SAC. This is a service which can be enabled for those of you that have Cloud Platform Enterprise Agreement credits in your Cloud Platform to enable SAC as an embedded application within another SAP application. So if you're running SuccessFactors or Concur or some CX tools, or if you're running S4 or S4 2020 on-premise, you can enable an embedded version of SAC, which will allow that application to use many of the features of SAC. The important point here is this is for single line of business. So this is not for data blending or data wrangling, but it gives you direct live access to the data in that source system. It does not give you access to any external data. So again, if you're in SuccessFactors and you're using embedded SAC within SuccessFactors, it can give you access to all of the SuccessFactors data, but nothing else. No CSV files, no text files, or in a third-party system. It does give you, importantly, this query designer integration. This is a key piece and a differentiator of this embedded SAC in that you can write queries directly within the tool, and that those queries have access to the semantic models within that application. So if you're thinking about success factors, the query builder within success factors knows the success factors model and will provide the appropriate joins as you build a query. It has intent-based navigation. This is a very key feature that both the embedded SAC and the enterprise SAC bring, but that really allows you to pass parameters between transactional screens and your analytical screens. So think about your SAC tenant that with intent-based navigation, you could click on an employee ID in SuccessFactors and launch a dashboard or a iframe containing a dashboard that would have that employee's data from SuccessFactors perspective visualized, right? This is a very important thing. But finally, I'll say with the embedded SAC that it's got a limited set of SAC features. Oops, sorry. It does not come with planning. It does not come with some of the machine learning and AI features, but it does come with all of those core self-service analytics and dashboarding features. The second one, and probably the one that most people would consider with SAC, is an enterprise SAC tenant, right? So at the top here, representing these two data sets, that you can have a dashboard that contains multiple lines of business in one page. So you could have sales and operations. You can do a little bit of data blending, data wrangling between the two, but not much, right? You'd still get direct access to data, but you also add the ability to connect to external data, both SAP and non-SAP. You get the ability to connect to BW and business objects. You get the same intent-based navigation that we talked about with the embedded edition, but you also get the ability to import data as well as the full suite of SAC features, some of which I covered earlier. So key difference here, the embedded SAC is licensed very differently. The enterprise SAC is licensed per user, either on a concurrent basis or a named user basis. Finally, and I think this is important to point out, on the right side, you've got SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, right? So for customers that say, well, I have an S4 system, but it doesn't have my history, or I have an S4 system, but I also have a third-party system that's handling my warehouse management or my supply chain, and I need to be able to bring that data together. You can't do that with SAC in and of itself. As I said, it's not a chainsaw. It's not an end-all be-all tool to keep in your belt. But with Data Warehouse Cloud, you can do those things. Data Warehouse Cloud is really a data warehouse, a HANA database in the cloud, but it's a data warehouse as a service. So you get the ability to bring in different sets of data, to model and blend them together, either visually or from a SQL basis, and to build federated or consolidated views of that data that can be consumed for analytics. Many of you over here may say, well, I don't have Data Warehouse Cloud, but I have SAP HANA as a data warehouse. That's fine. BW would be fine as well, obviously. But really what I want to illustrate here is that as you move from left to right, the complexity of the data modeling requirements that you have is really what drives your choice. So just to summarize, enterprise SAC, embedded SAC, and native SAC within S/4HANA Cloud, these are all the kind of flavors of SAC that you may be seeing in the market. In addition, SAP continues to support business objects, right? Especially with Lumira, Webby, and Crystal for those customers that need on-premise solutions for dashboarding and analytics. But with Webby and Crystal, you'll see more and more of the reporting functionalities that Webby used to bring being pushed into SAP Analytics Cloud functionality, as well as more and more the formatted reporting functionality that Crystal Reports brought. Finally, I just want to point out that SAC, especially with Business Objects 4.3, can now do a lot more powerful integration with the Business Objects platform. So for those of you who are running Business Objects and who are thinking about SAC, it's a lot easier both to consume your universes as a source for SAC, but also to consume your Webby reports as a source for SAC, which in some cases is a huge leap forward in efficiency because you don't have to rebuild all the semantics and the logic and the KPIs, but you can still jump ahead and get a visualization. It's a bit like somebody who lived in Africa and had no electricity or phone or anything, and then somebody just said, hey, you can have this iPhone and now you can connect to the internet. If you put SAC on top of a relatively old school business objects deployment, you can still get a lot of value while you consider the conversion. This cloud conversion program that I mentioned here at the bottom is SAP's program, which allows you to trade in credit on your business objects side for consumption with cloud credits, which can be used for SAC. Okay, so I'm going to hand it to Sharon now, and she's going to talk a little bit about Blue Diamond Growers' journey with SAC. I'll just say before I do that, you know, NIMBL and Blue Diamond Growers have been partnered on the SAC front and HANA and analytics in general for more than a year. Sharon and I met at an SAP event that happened. It was like the last event that I went to before COVID hit. And it was a great meeting and a great relationship we've had thus far. Appreciate you joining us here to share your story a little bit, Sharon. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barnaby. For those of you who don't know who Blue Diamond Growers is, we are a California agricultural cooperative. We market and process for our 3,500 almond growers, members of the cooperative, the almond crop each year. It's valued at over $1 billion here in California. And we, through that, are California's largest food export. And you'll see some of the products that we offer displayed on the slide. Next. Our journey with SAC has been kind of an iterative process, if you will. We were an early adopter of the concept of using HANA in the cloud for our data warehouse. And the reason for that is we made a very intentional decision when we went live with SAP in 2015, not to be a Bob J client. We had a very mature relationship with Qlik as our front end tool. We use that for dashboards, for reports, for visualizations. And we didn't want to change from that. So we adopted and used, fed the data through the cloud data warehouse and fed our Qlik for a while. I knew of SAP Analytics Cloud, but wasn't quite ready to adopt it because frankly, the features didn't at first measure up to what we were used to in Qlik. I've been very impressed over the last 4 years as I watched more and more research and money go into SAP Analytics Cloud. And I'm now very happy to say that it rivals Qlik in a lot of ways. And because of some of the future things that are coming, it actually is going to exceed because of that direct connection to our transactional data and so many of the planning features that Barnaby touched on. That led us to start to think, well, how do we slowly move from Qlik and start to use SAP Analytics Cloud? And we did that with our first use, which was a comprehensive dashboard that monitored the flow of our EDI data from within SAP with our third-party warehouses, non-Blue Diamond owned warehouses. That was highly successful and gave us for the first time the ability to see EDI as it was processed. And if anybody is familiar with electronic data interchange and some of the problems you run into when you have failures and the like, having a close to real-time transactional way to monitor that was just very invaluable to our team. So it was our first introduction to using SAP Analytics Cloud. Then I met up with NIMBL at a presentation where I saw the work that he was doing, or NIMBL was doing with the 49ers, and was very impressed. And so we partnered with them to develop our first line of business, KPI Driven Dashboard with our supply chain group. And we did that in 2020. And that's been very successful and cut out hours of manual work for some of our users from some of what they used to do. That application, for the first time, provides a consolidated view of data from our ECC system to our IBP system, both SAP products, but the data was never married. So users were oftentimes going into IBP, downloading into Excel, going into ECC, doing a bunch of manipulation, downloading, and doing Excel-based VLOOKUPs and all those things that users do when they're left to their own devices. Using our app, our story through Analytics Cloud, we are able to grant wide access to the data across IBP and ECC. We have better looking reports and analytics, and most importantly, it's KPI driven. They have their red, green, yellow, they can react to on a daily basis, and people at all levels of the organization can see what they need to see to act accordingly. So we went from being very reactive to being able to be much, much more proactive in the way the supply chain group manages the business. On the left here, you'll see just some samples of what that dashboard looks like. We use it to manage our deployment to our customers in terms of monitoring how many times we have to cut from their orders, how well we do with delivering on time and in full with our customers, inventory levels, everything. It's a one-stop shop for the supply chain group across a couple of disciplines. And then, like I said, they monitor via KPI. And it's been very, very successful. On the right, what you'll see is NIMBL engaged with them, and they built for us or tweaked the SAP standard version of the content usage dashboard. And I use that to tell how well are we doing when we roll out a story in SAC, who's using it, how are they using it, what are they clicking on most, what do they never click on? And we use it to identify areas for improvement, how we can get better engagement and adoption from our users. And frankly, as with any new thing, where we're not being successful and we're not getting adoption from our users, it allows me to be able to work with them, send somebody over to sit with them, to get them off their Excel and let them realize they don't need to be doing what they're doing with their downloads and their VLOOKUPs anymore. And I hope that in the future, this will become even more useful for us to build out our BI program. So this is a long-term journey for us. And our next steps, actually one we're in the middle of right now, is for the first time deploying Cloud for Planning along with analytics and for our marketing group. And that has been a very pivotal project for us because I was able to successfully talk the marketing group out of buying a third-party software to do this very same thing. And so now we're able for the first time to use planning to get their budget in. It's custom to them. It's broken up by their hierarchies, and it marries with the actuals in ECC, currently soon to be S4, and allows them to do very, very good monitoring of their marketing spend plans versus what we're actually doing, and proactively react when things are not going the way they want. Prior to this, they were spending many hours every month, again, downloading things, very siloed activities. And we're not live with it yet, but we will be soon. And so far, the user reaction has been excellent. Very, very pleased with it. One of our next things that we're going to do, we're actually in the middle, we're almost ready to go live with, is analysis for Office. And that's for those very special people in our organization who are currently doing siloed Excel activities with clunky joins and VLOOKUPs. I'm giving them access to transactional data that actually blends nicely with some of the dashboards that we're writing and allows them to dive in deeper and build their own custom Excels. We'll be using that for few key employees, but it's really going to make a big difference in the hours that they spend doing what they do. The other thing we're looking very much forward to is we're going live with S4 on July 4th weekend, and the addition of being able to have embedded analytics so that we can go straight from one of our dashboards, jump into the transaction and have that connection is something we're really excited about. We're of course also in the process of migrating to SAP on a cloud. And then most excitedly, just like we did with supply chain, we'll be going through each line of business throughout our infrastructure and seeing where we can put KPI dashboards and start to become much more modern in our approach to data, stopping this people from downloading things from SAC and doing all SAP, excuse me, and doing all the things that they do that are just time wasters, and really allowing them to focus their time on getting those nuggets of information that really help them run the business better. Yes.
Thank you, Sharon. I think it's important to understand for Blue Diamond and for all of you here that it's a journey, like Sharon mentioned, and that they've been rather aggressive, some might say, in starting this journey, especially on the HANA data warehouse side, but having these pieces in place such that they can move in a direction that takes the users to a more advanced place, and that they have the learnings and the lessons and the team in place to do it is important. So starting smaller, and then as you move into an S4 environment, adding planning, adding analysis for Office, adding other lines of business, and kind of growing that sphere and kind of bringing the business along with you. It is sometimes very difficult, as I'm sure you'd agree, Sharon, to just say we're ripping out the old tool and throwing in this new fancy thing, because it's a little bit shocking sometimes to users to go from that old mindset of Excel and VLOOKUPs and data dumping to a much more sort of hyper modern view of analytics that are much more self-service. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Very much agree. Thank you.
So with that, William, do you want to open it up for some Q&A? I'm not sure if you've got any waiting already.
Yeah. Thank you, Barnaby. I do. I have actually got 4 questions waiting in here. And again, thank you both very much for the presentation. And if anybody has any questions in our audience, please enter them into the question and answers tab. Our first question is from Lexi. It is, can you explain a bit more about the differences between embedded SAC and enterprise SAC?
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question. I think the important thing to understand is really the distinction between an embedded SAC system that is only got access to the data in which it's embedded and is available for use, importantly, from a licensing perspective, to essentially all the users of that application. The embedded version of SAC is licensed by time. It's a service that you activate and you receive, I believe today it's 150 concurrent user access with that embedded version. So usually it's a 10-to-1 kind of ratio. If you have 1,000 users, you need 100 concurrent licenses. So for most enterprises running something like SuccessFactors or S4, that embedded version would give them sufficient license to cover all of their S4 SuccessFactors users. The enterprise version gives you a couple things. It gives you the ability to have all the features of SAC, and it gives you the ability to bring in other sources of data, BW, business objects, or third-party flat files, but it is licensed differently. It's licensed per user or per concurrent user. Both can be embedded into an SAP application, but one of them is designed purely for that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I believe it does. All right, our second question, and we're getting a lot more questions right now in the chat. So I'll be asking them in the order that they received. We received some during the presentation as well. So our second question is from Stephen. It is, we are currently evaluating S4 HANA Cloud. Do we need to consider SAC as well?
I think the key here, if you're evaluating S4 HANA Cloud, is how much non-S4 data needs are you going to have? If you're loading your history, which in most cases you cannot do into S4 HANA Cloud, and you need access that for analytics, you will need likely a data warehouse cloud or further data warehouse solution to handle that requirement. If you're, so I guess the short answer is if you're doing S4 HANA Cloud and all you need is analytics within S4 HANA Cloud and all the data is there, then you should be fine. But any history, any third-party data, or any of the advanced features, some of which I highlighted today that you would need a separate enterprise edition of SAC and potentially a data warehouse to go with it.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Our third of, let's see, it looks like we have 6 total questions right now, so we'll run through them. Our third question is from Brian, and it is, can you elaborate a bit on how analysis for Office works with SAP Analytics Cloud?
Sure. So it can be a bit confusing because there's a lot of different names, and as many of you are aware, SAP can be a little challenging sometimes with the product names. But essentially, SAC has 3 versions at the moment, and I'm not even going to try to use the SAP name because it can be confusing even to me. But there's a full version which comes with a business objects license that many of you may already own. It gives you the ability to connect to BW or to BPC or to business objects based kind of federated BICS queries, but also to SAC, right? There is a second version which comes licensed to a user with their SAC license. And many customers aren't aware of this, but if you own SAC, you also own Analysis for Office. The only difference in that Analysis for Office for SAC is that all the data that you connect to has to come via SAC, number one. And number two, when you connect, you have to log in to SAC. So you're consuming a license, a concurrent or named user license when you do that. All the other features are there, and it's pretty powerful. The third option that you have available, which is also free to use with SAC, is a web-based version of Analysis for Office, which is really for Office 365. So it's a plugin to, if you're not an Excel customer, if all you use is the license, the web tools from Microsoft, this is a web plugin. That version of Analysis for Office is very feature light. So it's limited in what it can do compared to the other 2 versions. But before I leave this topic, those 3 versions, 1, 2, 3, of Analysis for Office can in many cases be superseded by Explorer and Data Analyzer, which I showed you earlier with a little demo. I hope that covers it.
Sure, it does. All right. And our 4th question of 6, again, we have a couple more, is I'm curious how Blue Diamond Growers has managed their user training with SAC. Has it been fairly self-service? Please explain.
That's a good question. It's something that's evolving at Blue Diamond. I have members of we have a 5-person BI team, and I have members of my team who actually, when we roll out a new story, they go and they sit with them and they kind of visit with a day in their life, and they teach them how to use SAC to its best advantage with the features that we've put into the story. That also helps us to know what's not there and what we need to add and how we can do better. And that's worked fairly well. We are in the process of putting together a, kind of first look training program to introduce some key features at a high level, but we'll probably always still continue to do one-on-one, sitting with them, teaching them how to use it, and then using that content usage tracker to actually see if we're successful, and then going back and revisiting where we're not successful.
Great, thank you for that answer. All right, our second to last question as it stands now is, could you please explain a little bit on ML/AI, so machine learning AI side of SAC?
Yeah, I mean, how can I put this? So there's many features of SAC that use machine learning and AI. There's a natural language processing engine that lets you query the data. There's also the ability to find what are kind of the most relevant dimensions driving a given behavior. So for example, you run a report and you see sales by state, and you see that one state has a spike in sales for a given time period. With SAC, you could have it automatically determine that the biggest driver of that change in the state of, let's say, California, is the product mix, or the biggest driver of that is the price, without you having to drill down like you would in an Excel report and say, show me the price, show me the product mix, let me sort, I see what it is, but rather do some of that for you. It's challenging, not technically, that the tool does that already. It's challenging to get people's minds in a headspace where they're willing to accept the machine or the robot or whatever you want to call it, determining what those drivers are. So that's one piece. The other is the one that I kind of emphasized a little bit before, which is around planning. So taking data, let's say that is by a given product family, using a planning function to aggregate it and group the data together, then running a machine learning or AI algorithm to find what its predicting sales might look like in the future, and then using a planning function after to disaggregate that. That's really a very powerful tool that SAC brings that other tools don't is inserting this machine learning and AI into an existing planning process.
All right, great, thank you. And our final question is, how easy is it to use SAC for workforce analytics using Sfsf and Ecchr? And they wanted to point out, we do headcount planning already on SAC.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So so using SuccessFactors data and Ecchr data to do analytics, easy. It's a bit of a loaded question because it's like, how easy is it to build a house? Like, it depends on the complexity of the analytics you're trying to do. Certainly, SAC could ingest data from multiple sources, including SuccessFactors and ECC, and you could do analytics on it. If you're using planning, I assume you're already ingesting some data from somewhere. If you wanted to do lots of blended data analytics, then having a data warehouse on which SAC can sit, like Blue Diamond does and many of our other clients do, gives you a little more power to do data modeling. But if you need to do multi-line of business analytics, where you have data from ECC and SuccessFactors, as well as data from your planning models all in one place, that's really a sweet spot of SAC. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. So that is the end of our webinar today. Barnaby, Sharon, do you have any last second thoughts?
No, I mean, I just say I'm not a salesperson, but if any of you are interested to hear more about anything I said today, or you know, something piqued your interest, you need a follow up, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to set up a short call with you to discuss your needs and help you better understand how SAC could serve them. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, and I would just add that our partnership with NIMBL has made us able to be as aggressive as we are. And I've really appreciated it. They're an augmentation to the staff that I have, and we wouldn't be here without them. So thank you very much.